Well, welcome, Paula.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I am well.
Good, good. Well, we have some wonderful questions. I'm so glad that you're here and that you volunteered. I didn't have to hunt you down. You volunteered. You said, if I can be of service to atonement by telling a little bit about my story and everything that you've learned, and you just gave me a 2-page book list of things because Paula knows that I like to read. And
I don't sleep, so.
there you go. So I'm very grateful for your willing to walk alongside atonement as we continue to learn and grow. And so the first question I have is just tell us, it's not a question, it's tell us a little bit about you and your family.
It's always a weird question because there's the row of people up there waving at me. We have, my spouse and I have been married for 30 years, and we have a total of 8 kids. Yes, I did say 8. 4 adults, 4 kids still at home. So that's kind of the family, and it's been a journey throughout the entire lifetime of our family. So, the tell me about your family is a huge loaded question.
Yep.
So just to sum up, I have one.
Yes, you do.
And there we go.
And they've been here with us. Wonderful. So how and when, the first big question is, how and when did you discover within yourself that you were a trans woman?
So that's also an interesting question because I am 53 years old. So way back when I was young, we didn't have the same language and vocabulary that we have now. So for people that were different, we called them queer, but not in the kind way that we do now, but in the more hateful way that we used to refer to people that were different. So growing up, I knew there was something different, but not having language or culture or anything to associate with. It was very isolating. So it wasn't until around 1979 that the phrase transgender was coined, and it wasn't until the 1990s that it actually became popularized as part of our current popular culture, and that was due largely to the internet. So when did I first know I was different? I've always known I was different. When did I have language around it? Much, much, much later in life.
Yeah, thank you so much. And a year ago, my kid Ash, she came out and shared that they were trans, and they're 17 now, and they're very open about it. But they were given language at a much earlier age to be able to figure out how they're different, because they always knew, right? But they were given that language, and so yeah. Well, what was it like to come out, and where's it been easiest and hardest for you?
It's been a journey. There's a kind of a misconception around coming out because largely we think of pride centered around the Stonewall riot in 1969. And the work in those communities has been centered around more of gay and lesbian, which is one experience of non-hetero existence. The challenge is that is a coming out event. You come out, you are public, and now people know. With transgender people, there's really 2. And one is the coming out, making it known. And then there's what's called disclosure, which happens for the rest of your life. And so conversations like this would fall into the disclosure side of that. So it's not the same when we say, when did you come out? What was that journey like? The journey, as with everything and maturing and growing, is ongoing. But within my experience, it's a little different because with every disclosure, there's risk.
Yes. So if I'm understanding this correctly, you may come out to your family, you may come out to your close friends, but the rest of your life, you choose if it's safe or not to say, or if you even want to, because nobody needs to know. it's nobody's business, right? To say, by the way, I'm a transgender woman, which is something I don't have to experience telling people over and over again. The only disclosure I have to do is say that I'm a pastor with people who hate church. But that is not the same. So how have others responded to you over the course of this journey?
If you do any reading within the transgender community, you'll hear a phrase, and I was kind of surprised, and it sounds like BS when I heard it years ago, and it still sounds like BS, but it's true. There's people you think that will reject you and move on and hate you. And there's people that you think will automatically accept you without concern. And those aren't the same people that are in reality. So people you thought were going to be allies turn out to not be allies. And people you thought were going to be rude, be hateful, be mean, turn out to be fairly decent allies. So the challenge in me coming out was centered around some of the biggest fears that pretty much everyone has. If I make a change, can I be successful? And what does success mean? How important is my happiness? You think you struggle with that now? Imagine if you changed your appearance or your identity, how much you risk. So there's some interesting statistics around just the employment aspect of coming out. I could go on forever about a lot of this stuff, so I know we're on a time constraint. But just if you're interested, I've got lots and lots of facts.
Yes. You had just brought up the word ally, and I know we had a conversation about that. That is an interesting word. I consider myself an LGBTQ plus ally, and yet that word, as you said, not everybody shapes up to be one. So can you just maybe say a little bit more about
My feelings on that?
My feeling, yeah.
Yeah. This is commentary. This is my opinion. Taking on the nomenclature or the badge of ally isn't probably what you think. Feel free, if you're affirming, to say, hey, I'm affirming. That means you're okay with someone that's gay. You're okay with someone that's trans. You're not going to flee. You're not going to be weird. That's affirming. An ally is someone that steps up between you and danger. Someone that's willing to take a risk. A financial risk, a social risk, a personal risk. That's what's important. So if you say, I'm an ally, and you project that out, and you tell somebody who is in the community, they're not going to believe you right away. Because it's going to take you showing up, stepping in front. And what that looks like is stopping others from saying something. Not speaking for a group that you're not a part of. Not saying, I am an authority on, if you haven't lived that experience. Default to somebody that is living that experience. So I'm not saying don't do anything. Be affirming. For heaven's sakes, please be affirming. And please be an ally. But if you think about World War II, we called the Axis and the Allies. They had skin in the game, literally. So maybe make that connection when thinking about allyship.
I love that because it says, I don't have to do anything to be, for the most part, safe and secure in my life. I can just be. For me to name that I'm an ally would mean that I'm specifically putting myself in a position to take the dart for somebody that I love. And because and I love that, just the way you named it. Thank you. What has your transition been like, socially, emotionally, and so forth?
You always ask the weird questions, the ones that are hard. My transition has been similar and dissimilar from everyone else's. We talked a little bit earlier about coming out and disclosure.
Yep.
There gets to be a point where what's called passing, that is, people don't just stop and gawk at you on the road. And there's a lot to why transgender people want to pass. And that's not necessarily a transgender thing, that's also a cultural thing. We all put on masks, we all play games, we all make ourselves look like everyone else. So, passing is a thing. I had an experience, and I shared this with you. I was in a DEI group with a professional organization that I'm a part of. And during that meeting, another member essentially outed me. That is, they identified me as trans before I did. And then they continued to step in it and drag it around the room. At one point, I just kind of said, hey, we should talk about this outside of this meeting because this is going to take a little bit more. We don't need to detract. During that conversation after, she asked me, well, when do you disclose? And if you hear nothing else today, hear this. I don't. I don't disclose. I am who I am. Being a being a transgender woman is the least interesting thing about me. Being gay, lesbian, bi, asexual, agendered, from Mars, well, maybe not from Mars, but these aren't the most interesting things about people. So that's been my journey of living, is to live my life in such a way that that is not the most interesting thing people want to know about me.
I love that. That's exactly where I was hoping you were going. You are more than, right? We are all more than labels that people try to put on us in general, but we can hyper-focus on certain things when we're trying to wrap our brain around them. As allies, one other powerful thing we can do is to not, like, we talked about which questions we were going to ask, and you politely told me a couple of the questions were not appropriate. And I really appreciate that a lot because sometimes our curiosity and want to know gets we're looking in someone's window, and that's not appropriate. That's not fair. We wouldn't want that for ourselves. We wouldn't want some questions asked of us. And there's actually been really, really great things online where people will questions that were asked to gay people, questions that were asked to transgender people, they turn around and they ask them to straight cis people, and you realize how inappropriate they are. You realize how, like, I don't want to answer that question about my husband and I or whatever. Like, why would I ever ask that to somebody else? So that's something for us to consider is, if we do have a question, who is it appropriate to talk to? Who has consented to say, I'm willing to answer some of your awkward questions, versus just walking up to someone and saying, I demand that you tell me about your personal life. That is not appropriate.
Yeah, there's a phrase called tokenizing someone. Mm-hmm. And that is, oh, I know a trans woman, or I know a trans man. You're going to be my teacher about all things trans. That will be the last time you hear from them, even if they're family. We are not your encyclopedia. Google it. Just Google it. Yes, you'll get weird answers. But a thoughtful, hey, I was reading this online and this seemed pretty sus, that's a different question than, hey, have you had this surgery? Totally different feel and vibe. So having good conversations. So I applaud people that are curious. Curiosity is the thing that makes the huge difference in communication. If you are honest and you are full-hearted, not F-O-O-L, F-U-L-L, and are curious about someone's experience, lean into the curiosity and then ask questions.
I love that. So here was a question that did come from in our postcard, and it was, if only about 1% of people identify as gender diverse, non-binary, transgender, agender, why are we hearing so much about it now?
Good question. Why now? Why this? Why now? The easy answer is we don't want to see kids die. That's the easy answer. The more difficult answer is there's always been trans people. There's always been people that are different. There's always people who have felt isolated, alone, and separate from. I had mentioned that the phrase transgender was coined in around 1979. However, it wasn't until the 90s that it began to hit the popular cultures. Anyone else know what happened around the 90s? Rhymes with internet. That isolation of people were able to reach out beyond their towns, beyond their experiences, beyond their family and friends, and say, is there anyone else like me? And as we build community, we realize that we aren't the only ones. In 1970, whatever, I had no access to anything except for my immediate family, which are great. But it was isolating. And as we've provided a better community, it's become more acceptable for individuals to say, hey, I'm not alone. I am different. As we've done that and culture has fought back against, being different, young people have been put at risk.
And with that, as more people get to know who they are, they have language, they're forming community, they're being less ashamed of who they are, they're coming forward and being more public, the backlash against that with laws and really myths and misconceptions and scapegoating, as that's heightened, and unfortunately, a lot of that has been linked to Christian pastors and other people who are proponing these myths and misconceptions. Therefore, churches should be on the forefront of dispelling those myths, because it is our own Christian siblings who are sometimes the forefront of harming the gender diverse and sexual diverse community. One other thought was it isn't actually 1%. It's higher than that.
It's higher than that.
You gave me this beautiful graph that said by generation. So boomers, Gen X represent, millennials, Gen Z. As there's language and as community grows, it is easier for the younger generations to identify as part of that community. And so it's sort of like, if I'm right, when left-handedness stopped being a problem, all of a sudden, magically, all these people identified as being left-handed. It's not because suddenly more people were born left-handed. It was just safe to do so. Same thing with the younger generations. There's a much greater percentage, up to 23% of the youngest generation that identifies as LGBTQ plus.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You had mentioned about the Christian community, and one of the things that you often hear within churches is we're a family. Isn't that nice? We're a family. We treat everyone like family.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna read some statistics here about family and the queer community. Research demonstrates that 74% of gay, lesbian adults report acceptance from all siblings, compared to only 58% within the transgender adults. The disparity becomes more pronounced with extended family, where 30% of gay, lesbian individuals reported acceptance versus 10% of trans adults. Parental acceptance shows similar patterns, with approximately 50% of gay and lesbian individuals reporting parental acceptance compared to 33% of transgender individuals. So think about that when you use the word family with someone within the queer community. Their experience within family has not been one of acceptance. Now, I do have to tell a story.
Okay.
So, when I came out, I have this most beautiful, wonderful coming out speech. And I apologize, I'm going to give it to you right now. It goes like this. I'm transgender. Do you have any questions? I know, it's long. It's long-winded. When I told my parents this, my mom asked me one question, and that was it. And it wasn't this weird personal thing. There was no guilt. There was no shame. There was no, how could you do this to us? It was just something I wanted to know. Okay. A few weeks later, they live in Phoenix, and I was down there, and we were sitting by the pool, and I leaned over and I said to my mother, is there really anything else that you want to know? I mean, it's just you and I here. She's like, where did you want to go to dinner tonight? And I tell that story over and over because that has been my experience with my immediate family. You are who you are, and we love you for who you are, not what you are. So my encouragement to atonement is to really lock into that who are you, not what are you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So that answers the question, why now? Why is Pastor Siri talking about this all the time? This is why. So thank you so much for all of the sharing as we wrap up our time here. You are more than, as you said, and your profession is actually that you are a parent coach. Can you
Yes.
briefly just say what that is?
So I provide a safe space of unwavering acceptance, guiding parents to create a more thriving, connected family with confidence. So that's kind of what I do. I have a real heart for helping families. And a lot of that comes from my experience of screwing it up for so many years. If you're interested in more of that, absolutely. Not screwing up your family, but knowing about coaching. Anytime that I speak, I try very hard to give something free of charge. You can use it however you will. Normally, it's a little interesting factoid. This time, it's actually something timely. I have created an activity guide for Pride Month. So it's a QR code. You can take a picture with your camera and download it. Totally free. I'm not going to ask for your email address or anything. 100% free to you to do with whatever you will. So this will be available. I think we'll just kind of
Absolutely.
give it to you, and you can stick it wherever you want in a drawer.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much, Paula. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.